The moment the most dangerous man in Manhattan touched my hand, an entire ballroom forgot how to breathe. The chandeliers above the Grand Lexington Ballroom threw gold across the marble floors like liquid fire, reflecting off crystal glasses and diamond necklaces that probably cost more than my student loans. I kept my eyes lowered anyway. That was the trick at events like this. Don't stare at rich people too long. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't become memorable. I adjusted the silver tray against my palm and moved carefully between tables while a string quartet played somewhere near the stage. My heels hurt. My shoulders hurt. My entire body felt like it had been running on caffeine and survival for the past 6 months, because it had. "Claire, table 7 needs champagne," my manager hissed as he brushed past me. "And smile like you actually want to be here." I forced one onto my face. A fake one. The kind women learn young. The kind that says I'm fine even when rent is overdue and your landlord has started leaving printed notices under your door in bright red ink. Tonight's charity gala was filled with politicians, tech billionaires, and old Manhattan families who carried themselves like royalty. Everyone here smelled expensive. Tailored suits, French perfume, cigars worth more than my weekly grocery budget. And then the room changed. I felt it before I saw him. Conversations softened. Waiters straightened. Even the security near the entrance shifted their posture like soldiers preparing for inspection. I looked up just as the doors opened. Damen Moretti walked in wearing a black suit, so perfectly tailored it looked dangerous by itself. Tall, broad shoulders, dark hair swept back neatly. No tie, just the open collar of a crisp white shirt beneath the jacket and a silver watch glinting beneath the ballroom lights. But it was his eyes that stopped me. Cold gray, sharp enough to cut through a crowd without effort. He moved slowly through the ballroom, while men twice his age stepped aside instinctively. Nobody announced him. Nobody had to. Power like that didn't need introductions. "Jesus," one of the bartenders whispered beside me. "That's Moretti." I knew the name. Everyone in New York did. Real estate, shipping, nightclubs, rumors people lowered their voices to repeat. Stories about judges who suddenly retired and businessmen who disappeared from headlines overnight after crossing him. Nobody ever confirmed anything. Nobody ever wanted to. I should have looked away. Instead, I stared for half a second too long. And somehow his eyes found mine across the ballroom. My chest tightened instantly. It wasn't attraction. Not exactly. It felt more like standing too close to the edge of something high and realizing one wrong move could ruin your life. Then someone grabbed my wrist. Hard enough to make me gasp. "Hey, sweetheart," a slurred male voice said near my ear. "You've been avoiding our table all night." Senator Richard Holloway smelled like whiskey and arrogance. Mid-50s. Red-faced. Wealthy enough that nobody told him no often enough. His fingers tightened around my wrist while his friends laughed quietly behind him. "Sir," I said carefully, trying to pull free without causing a scene. "Please let go." "Relax," he chuckled. "I'm just talking to you." The tray in my other hand shook slightly. Champagne glasses rattled together with tiny crystal clicks that sounded too loud in my ears. Around us, people noticed, and then immediately pretended not to. That was Manhattan. Wealthy people ignored ugly things beautifully. I said let go. My voice came out steadier this time. Holloway smiled wider instead. "You girls always act difficult until... remove your hand." The voice cut through the ballroom quietly. But somehow every conversation nearby died instantly anyway. Holloway froze. Slowly, his grip loosened from my wrist. I turned. Damen Moretti stood only a few feet away now. Calm. Expressionless. One hand resting casually in his pocket, while 2 men in dark suits lingered behind him like shadows. Holloway forced a nervous laugh. "Mr. Moretti, I didn't realize this waitress belonged to your event staff personally." Damien's eyes moved to my wrist briefly. I noticed something shift in his expression then. Not anger exactly. Something colder. More controlled. Which somehow felt worse. He stepped closer until I caught the scent of cedarwood and expensive cologne beneath the ballroom air. My heartbeat stumbled embarrassingly hard. "Stand next to me," he said softly. I should have refused. Every rational instinct in my body screamed to walk away from this man. But the entire room was watching now. Politicians. Socialites. Security. Everyone waiting to see what happened next. I moved beside him slowly. Damien's fingers closed lightly around my hand. Warm. Steady. possessive enough that the entire ballroom immediately understood the message without another word spoken. Cameras flashed somewhere across the room. Holloway looked suddenly pale. Damen never looked at him again. His attention stayed on me as he spoke quietly enough that only I could hear him. Don't look away. My throat tightened. What? His thumb brushed once against my knuckles. Barely there. Yet somehow it felt more dangerous than the senator grabbing my wrist. Let them see who you belong to. And just like that, the entire ballroom stopped seeing me as Claire Bennett, the exhausted event worker trying to survive another paycheck. Now I was standing beside Damen Moretti while Manhattan's elite stared at me like I had just become the most dangerous woman in the room. I did not realize my hand was shaking until Damen Moretti lifted his champagne glass, and the crystal rattled softly against his watch. The sound snapped me back into my body, back into the ballroom, back into the reality that hundreds of eyes were still fixed on us. I tried to pull my hand away carefully. His fingers tightened just enough to stop me. Not painful. Worse. Controlled. Deliberate. Smile. He murmured without looking at me. Everyone is taking pictures. Sure enough, flashes kept bursting across the room from phones and discreet cameras. Manhattan socialites lived for moments like this. Scandal wrapped in luxury. I forced another fake smile even though my pulse felt completely unsteady. You cannot just do this, I whispered through clenched teeth. You do not even know me. Damen finally looked down at me then. Calm gray eyes. Completely unreadable. I know enough. The orchestra continued playing somewhere behind us, but the music sounded distant now, muffled beneath the roaring pressure inside my chest. Senator Holloway had disappeared into the crowd entirely. Coward. My wrist still burned where he had grabbed me. Damen noticed me rubbing it lightly. His jaw tightened almost invisibly. Did he hurt you? No, the answer came too quickly. Too automatic. Years of surviving New York had taught me women answered no even when the truth was complicated. His eyes held mine another second longer than necessary. Like he knew that too. Then one of the men behind him stepped closer. Sir, he said quietly. The mayor just arrived. Damen barely nodded. 5 minutes. The bodyguard disappeared immediately. I stared after him in disbelief. Nobody spoke to Damen casually. Nobody questioned him. The realization unsettled me more than I wanted to admit. This was not regular wealth. This was something heavier. Older. The kind of power that changed the air in a room. You can let go of my hand now, I said. No, I blinked. Excuse me. If I let go now, people will think I changed my mind. His tone remained perfectly calm, which somehow made the statement even more absurd. About what? About protecting you. My frustration cracked through the panic for a second. I did not ask for your protection. No, he said softly. But you needed it anyway. Before I could answer, an older woman wearing emerald diamonds approached us with a polished smile that did not reach her eyes. Damen, she purred. You never told us you were bringing someone tonight. Her gaze moved over me slowly. Measuring. Judging. The women at events like this always looked immaculate. Perfect hair. Perfect posture. Perfect cruelty hidden behind expensive lipstick. Damen rested one hand lightly against the small of my back. The contact sent a shock of awareness through me, so sudden it annoyed me immediately. Claire Bennett, he said simply. The woman waited for more. None came. Damen clearly did not explain himself to anyone. Lovely to meet you, dear, she said politely, though her eyes suggested otherwise. You must be very special. I opened my mouth before I could stop myself. Actually, I am just working. Tonight. Damen's thumb brushed once against my back. A warning. Tiny. Barely noticeable. But I felt it instantly. The woman noticed too. Her smile faltered. Well, she said awkwardly, enjoy the evening. The moment she walked away, I stepped back from him completely. This time he allowed it. What is wrong with you? I hissed quietly. You are acting like I belong to you. A flicker of something crossed his face then. Not amusement exactly. Something darker. More personal. That was the point. I am not some object you can claim in front of your billionaire friends. No, he agreed calmly. You are the woman a United States senator thought he could put his hands on in a crowded ballroom because nobody here would stop him. The words hit harder than I expected. Because part of me knew he was right. Nobody had moved. Nobody had helped. They had all looked away beautifully. Damen stepped closer again, lowering his voice. Look around, Claire. I hated how my name sounded in his voice. Too smooth. Too intimate. Slowly I looked. Everywhere around the ballroom, People avoided direct eye contact now. Men who had openly stared at me earlier suddenly kept their distance. Staff members straightened respectfully when I passed. Even security watched me differently. Not invisible anymore. Protected. The realization sent unease crawling beneath my skin. You changed something tonight? I whispered. Yes. Why? Damien studied me carefully before answering. Because men like Holloway only respect consequences. Silence stretched between us. Then his phone vibrated once inside his jacket. He glanced at the screen briefly. For the first time all evening, I saw actual irritation touch his expression. His eyes lifted toward the ballroom entrance. Two men in dark suits had just walked inside. Foreign accents. Hard faces. The atmosphere near Damien shifted instantly. Colder. More alert. His bodyguards repositioned subtly around the room. My stomach tightened. Something was wrong. Damien noticed my expression immediately. Claire. What? When I tell you to leave with my driver in 5 minutes, he said quietly. You are not going to argue with me. The music kept playing. But the ballroom no longer felt elegant. It felt tense. Like everyone was pretending nothing had changed while silently waiting for something terrible to happen. I followed Damien's gaze toward the two men near the entrance. Expensive suits. Sharp expressions. One of them scanned the room too carefully to be a normal guest. The other spoke quietly into an earpiece before noticing Damien watching him. The air shifted instantly. Who are they? I whispered. Damien did not answer immediately. His attention stayed fixed across the ballroom, while one of his bodyguards moved closer to him. The car is ready downstairs, the guard said quietly. Good, Damien replied. Take Miss Bennett home. Home. The word should have comforted me. Instead, my stomach tightened harder. Wait, I said quickly. What is happening? Damien finally looked at me again. Calm. Controlled. But something colder lived underneath now. Nothing you need to worry about. That is not an answer. It is the only one you are getting tonight. Frustration flared through my fear. You cannot drag me into whatever this is and then act mysterious. One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not a smile. More like exhaustion hidden beneath control. Claire. His voice softened unexpectedly. Please do not make this difficult. The sincerity in those words unsettled me more than anger would have. Before I could answer, one of the foreign men started moving toward us through the crowd. Damien noticed instantly. So did every guard in the room. I felt it happen like a silent wave. Tiny earpieces touched. Shoulders straightened. Positions shifted subtly around the ballroom exits. Nobody panicked, which somehow made it scarier. Damien stepped closer to me again until his body blocked part of the approaching man from view. Listen carefully, he said quietly. My driver will take you home. Tomorrow morning someone from my office will contact you. I stared at him. Your office? Yes. Why would your office contact me? Because after tonight, he said calmly, your life is going to become very inconvenient. Almost on cue, phones around the ballroom started lighting up. Notifications, texts, social media, alerts. A woman near the bar gasped softly while staring at her screen. Another guest looked directly at me and whispered something to her husband. My blood ran cold. Damien saw the realization hit me. Pictures, I whispered. Yes. Oh my God. I grabbed my own phone from my apron pocket with trembling fingers. 3 missed calls from my roommate. 12 text messages. Instagram notifications exploding faster than I could open them. Then I saw the headline already spreading across Manhattan gossip accounts. Damien Moretti arrives with mystery woman. Attached beneath it was a photo of his hand around mine in the center of the ballroom. My face went completely hot. This is insane. Welcome to New York, Damien said dryly. No, I snapped quietly. This is your fault. For the first time all evening, genuine guilt flickered across his expression. Fast, almost invisible, but I saw it. Then the foreign man finally reached us. Mid-40s, thick accent, cold eyes that settled on me immediately. Mr. Moretti, he said smoothly. Interesting choice for a public appearance. Damien's entire posture changed beside me. Still calm, but dangerous now in a way I could physically feel. You should not be here, Victor. The man smiled faintly. And yet here I am. His eyes moved over me again. Slow, calculating. I resisted the urge to step backward. Damien noticed anyway. He shifted slightly in front of me without making it obvious. Protective, possessive, both at once. Victor chuckled softly. Ah, he said. So the rumors are true already. Careful, Damien replied quietly. The ballroom suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. I could hear my own heartbeat over the orchestra music now. Victor raised his hands lightly. Relax. I only came to congratulate you. His gaze sharpened toward me again. Although I admit, she does not look like your usual type. Damien's expression never changed. Leave. The single word landed like a closed door. Victor studied him for another long second before smiling again. Good night, Mr. Moretti. Then he walked away into the crowd. The moment he disappeared, Damien exhaled slowly through his nose. Barely noticeable, but enough for me to realize. Something terrifying. He had been tense too. Who was that? I asked quietly. Someone you are safe for not knowing. You keep saying things like that. Because they are true. My phone buzzed again violently in my hand. More messages. More headlines. More photos spreading online by the second. My entire normal life suddenly felt very far away. The tiny Brooklyn apartment. My secondhand coffee maker. My overdue electric bill taped to the fridge. All of it seemed absurd compared to standing here beside a man who could silence an entire ballroom with one look. Damien reached out slowly and adjusted the sleeve of my black uniform where Holloway had wrinkled it earlier. Such a small gesture. Gentle. Careful. Completely at odds with the terrifying reputation attached to his name. You are shaking, he murmured. Because I think my life just exploded. His eyes held mine steadily. No, he said quietly. Your life was already in danger. The words settled heavily between us. Then he added something even worse. Tonight just made certain people realize I noticed you first. The rain started just after midnight. Heavy Manhattan rain that turned street lights into blurred gold streaks across the windshield. I sat in the back seat of Damien Moretti's black Mercedes with my hands clenched tightly in my lap, while the city slid past outside like a dream I could not wake up from. Nobody spoke. The driver focused silently on the road while another SUV followed behind us through the wet streets. Security. Of course it was security. Everything around Damien seemed wrapped in layers of control. My phone had not stopped vibrating for 20 straight minutes. Calls from coworkers. Messages from people I barely knew. Even my landlord had somehow texted me 3 question marks and a link to a gossip article. I finally shut the phone off completely. Smart decision. Damien's voice came from beside me. I jumped slightly. I had almost forgotten he was there. He sat relaxed against the leather seat, one arm resting near the window while Manhattan lights flashed across the sharp lines of his face. Calm. Untouchable. Like tonight had not detonated my entire life. You could have warned me. I muttered. About what exactly? I stared at him in disbelief. About the fact that standing next to you apparently turns someone into national gossip overnight. A quiet breath escaped him. Not quite a laugh. You are not national gossip. Wonderful. Just Manhattan gossip then. That actually pulled the smallest hint of amusement into his eyes. It disappeared quickly. The attention will calm down in a few days. You sound very confident about that. I am. Why? His gaze moved toward the rain outside. Because tomorrow the news cycle will find something else to obsess over. Easy for him to say. Men like Damien Moretti survived attention differently. Wealth protected them. Power protected them. Men like him became myths. Women standing beside them became targets. The realization made my chest tighten again. What did you mean earlier? I asked quietly. At the ballroom. His eyes returned to mine instantly. About what? You said my life was already in danger. Silence settled heavily inside the car. The windshield wipers moved steadily back and forth. Rain tapped softly against the glass. Damien looked almost irritated with himself for a second, like he had said more than intended. Claire. His voice lowered slightly. There are people in my world who pay attention to vulnerabilities. I am not part of your world. Not by choice. I frowned. That does not even make sense. He studied me for a long moment before answering. Tonight you embarrassed a powerful man publicly. You mean Senator Holloway? Yes. I embarrassed him because he grabbed me. Damien's jaw tightened instantly. I am aware. Something dangerous flickered beneath those words. Cold. Precise. I looked away first. Outside, Times Square glowed through the rain like another planet entirely. Tourists hurried beneath umbrellas while giant digital billboards flashed luxury ads across wet pavement. New York kept moving no matter who got destroyed inside it. Take the next right, I told the driver quietly. Damien glanced toward me. You do not need to go home tonight. I blinked. Excuse me. Your apartment building security is terrible. How would you know that? The question slipped out before I could stop it. For the first time since meeting him, Damien looked genuinely caught off guard. Barely, but enough. I make it my business to know certain things. My pulse stumbled strangely. You investigated me? Basic precautions. That is insane. No, he said calmly. It is responsible. I stared at him harder now. Suddenly memories started rearranging themselves in my mind. The way he already knew my full name tonight. The immediate way he stepped in when Holloway touched me. The certainty in his voice whenever he spoke about protecting me. How long? I asked quietly. He did not answer immediately, which was answer enough. My stomach flipped unexpectedly. Damien. Several months. The words landed heavily between us. Several months. I repeated slowly. You have been watching me for several months? Not personally. That does not make it less creepy. Another flicker of amusement touched his expression. Brief. Dangerous. Human. You work 3 jobs, he said quietly instead of defending himself. You leave your apartment before 6 every morning. You drink terrible coffee from the deli on Lexington because it is $1 cheaper than Starbucks. You send half your extra income to your younger brother in Chicago every month, even when it leaves you barely enough for groceries. My throat tightened completely. How do you know that? Because details matter. The car slowed beside my apartment building in Brooklyn. Old brick. Flickering hallway light. One broken security camera above the entrance that my landlord still had not fixed. Suddenly the building looked exactly the way Damien described it. Vulnerable. Exposed. The driver stopped at the curb. Rain hammered against the roof harder now. Damien looked toward the building once before speaking quietly. You should not stay here tonight. I crossed my arms immediately. Defensive. I am not going to your penthouse. Good, he replied calmly. Because I was not offering mine. Confusion crossed my face. Damien reached into his jacket and handed me a small white keycard with no logo on it. It is a suite at the Four Seasons downtown. Registered under another name. Security downstairs. Already has your information. I stared at the card in my hand. You planned this? Yes. You really think someone is going to come after me because of tonight? Damien's gray eyes held mine steadily through the dim car lighting. I think, he said softly, that men like Holloway become dangerous when they are embarrassed in public. Then his gaze shifted suddenly past me toward my apartment entrance. Every trace of softness disappeared from his face instantly. Do not move, he said quietly. My heartbeat stopped. Why? Damien's eyes narrowed toward the sidewalk outside. Because there is a man standing across the street taking pictures of this car. My entire body went cold. What? I whispered. Damien did not look away from the rain-streaked window. Across the street, beneath the flickering glow of a laundromat sign, a man stood partially hidden under a black umbrella. At first glance, he looked ordinary. Dark jacket, baseball cap, phone in his hand. But once Damien pointed him out, I noticed the angle of the phone, the way it stayed directed toward the Mercedes. Toward me. Do you know him? I asked quietly. No, Damien's answer came instantly. Too instantly. One of the bodyguards in the SUV behind us stepped out into the rain. Calm. Unhurried. Like this happened often. The man across the street noticed immediately and started walking away without looking back. My pulse spiked. Oh my God. Damien opened his door before I could say anything else. Cold rain rushed into the car with him. Stay inside, he ordered quietly. Damien, stay inside, Claire. Then he stepped out onto the wet sidewalk. Even standing in the rain at nearly 1 in the morning, he somehow looked composed. Untouchable. Streetlights reflected against the dark wool of his coat, while cars hissed through puddles nearby. I watched through the fogged window as his bodyguard spoke quietly into an earpiece. The man with the umbrella disappeared around the corner completely. Damien stayed still another moment, scanning the street carefully before returning to the car. Water glistened in his dark hair now. Tiny drops clung to the collar of his coat. He shut the door firmly behind him. We are leaving. I live here. Not tonight. His tone left no room for argument. The driver pulled away from the curb immediately. I twisted around in my seat, watching my apartment building disappear behind us. 3rd floor window. Cheap blinds. Tiny kitchen table where I paid bills every Sunday night. Everything suddenly looked fragile. Exposed. You think he was dangerous? I asked quietly. Damien wiped rainwater from his watch with one thumb before answering. I think he knew exactly which car to photograph. Silence settled heavily inside the Mercedes again. Manhattan glowed across the bridge ahead of us while rain hammered softly against the roof. I wrapped my arms tighter around myself. This is insane. Damien looked at me carefully. You keep saying that. Because it is. Frustration cracked through my fear again. Yesterday, my biggest problem was overdue rent and whether my manager would cut my shifts after the gala season ended. Now, apparently strangers are waiting outside my apartment taking pictures because a billionaire decided to hold my hand in public. His eyes sharpened slightly. I am not a billionaire. I stared at him. That is the part you are correcting? Another brief flicker of amusement touched his face. Gone almost immediately. You are angry. Of course I am angry. Good. I blinked. Good. Fear makes people freeze. Anger keeps you alert. The calm certainty in his voice made my chest tighten strangely. Like he had spent years surviving situations where staying alert mattered more than comfort. I looked out the window again. I still do not understand why any of this matters. Damien stayed quiet for several seconds. Long enough that I thought he might ignore the question completely. Then finally, softly, he said, because people assume attention equals weakness. I frowned. What does that mean? Men in my world notice what other men care about. His gaze moved toward me steadily. Tonight they saw me care. The honesty in those words unsettled me more than anything else had tonight. I looked away first. The Mercedes slowed beneath the glowing awning of the Four Seasons downtown. Valets hurried through the rain carrying umbrellas, while gold light spilled across the wet pavement outside. Everything looked impossibly expensive. The kind of hotel people like me only entered for job interviews or weddings that were not theirs. I cannot afford this, I muttered automatically. Damien almost looked offended. You are not paying for it. That is not the point. Then what is? I opened my mouth, closed it again, because the truth sounded embarrassingly fragile now that I sat beside him. I did not want to owe Damien Moretti anything. Not favors. Not protection. Not safety. Men with this much power never gave things freely. Somewhere beneath all his calm control lived a cost. There had to be. Damien studied my expression carefully like he could hear every thought anyway. Claire. His voice softened unexpectedly. You do not owe me anything. That only made me trust him less. The driver opened my door beneath a large black umbrella while hotel staff immediately straightened at the sight of Damien stepping out behind me. Nobody greeted him casually. Nobody smiled too widely. They all treated him with the same careful respect I had seen at the ballroom. Fear wrapped in professionalism. Inside, the lobby smelled like polished marble and expensive flowers. A pianist played softly near the lounge while wealthy guests drifted through the gold-lit space, pretending not to stare at us. Damien guided me toward the private elevators with one hand lightly against my back again. Warm, steady, dangerous to my common sense. Room 728, he told the concierge quietly. No calls connected unless cleared through Matteo. Of course, Mr. Moretti. The elevator doors closed around us smoothly. Silence filled the mirrored space. I looked exhausted in the reflection. Smudged makeup, wrinkled black uniform, hair falling loose from its pins. Beside me, Damien still looked perfectly composed despite the rain and chaos. Like he belonged in every expensive room he entered. You investigated me for months, I said quietly into the silence. His reflection met mine in the mirror. Yes. Why? This time he answered immediately. Because 6 months ago you walked into one of my restaurants after working a 16-hour shift and gave your last $20 to a waitress whose son was sick. My breath caught completely. Damien's gaze stayed on mine in the reflection. Calm. Certain. And because after that, he said softly, I could not stop noticing you. The elevator suddenly felt too small. Too quiet. Damien's words stayed suspended between us, while soft jazz played faintly from hidden speakers overhead. 6 months ago you walked into one of my restaurants after working a 16-hour shift and gave your last $20 to a waitress whose son was sick. I stared at my reflection in the mirrored wall, because looking directly at him suddenly felt dangerous in an entirely different way. You remember that? I asked quietly. I remember everything about that night. My pulse stumbled again. I hated how easily this man unsettled me. The elevator doors opened onto a private hallway lined with cream-colored carpets and soft gold lighting. Everything smelled expensive. Clean. Safe. Damien rested one hand near the small of my back again as we walked toward the suite. Not pushing, guiding, possessive in a way that somehow felt more intimate because he barely touched me at all. I should have hated it. Instead, my body noticed every inch of space between us anyway. The suite door opened with a soft electronic click. Then I stopped walking entirely. The room looked larger than my apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked lower Manhattan glowing beneath the rain, while soft lamps illuminated polished wood floors and white furniture that probably cost more than my yearly income. A dining table sat near the windows beside untouched flowers and a bottle of sparkling water resting in silver ice. "This is ridiculous," I muttered under my breath. Damien stepped inside behind me. "It is secure. It is a palace." "You are exaggerating." I turned toward him sharply. "No, Damien, my entire apartment could fit inside this living room." He loosened the cuff of his watch calmly. "Then tonight should feel spacious." I stared at him in disbelief before something completely inappropriate happened. I laughed, a short, exhausted laugh that escaped before I could stop it. Damien looked, genuinely surprised for half a second. Then something softer entered his expression. Not arrogance. Relief. Like he preferred hearing me laugh instead of panic. The realization hit me strangely hard. "There are clothes in the bedroom," he said quietly. "My assistant guessed your size." "Your assistant guessed my size?" "She is frighteningly efficient." Another laugh nearly escaped me despite myself. Damien moved toward the windows while removing his coat slowly. Rain streaked across the city behind him in silver lines. Without the jacket, he somehow looked even broader, stronger, like the expensive suits only barely disguised how dangerous he actually was. I caught myself staring and immediately looked away. "You should try to sleep," he said softly without turning around. "I doubt that is happening tonight." "Probably not." Silence settled between us again. Not awkward exactly. Heavy. Like both of us were thinking too much. I walked slowly toward the windows. New York spread endlessly beneath the storm outside. Taxis moved like glowing rivers through wet streets, while helicopters blinked red above the skyline. Somewhere down there was my tiny apartment. My normal life. It already felt impossibly far away. "Did you really investigate me because of one moment?" I asked quietly. Damien stayed still beside the glass. "No, then why?" He turned toward me fully then. Gray eyes steady. "Because every time I saw you after that, you were still kind even when life gave you no reason to be." My throat tightened unexpectedly. Nobody had ever said something like that to me before, especially not a man whose name made senators nervous. I crossed my arms defensively. "You barely know me. I know you work until your feet ache." His voice remained calm. "Certain. I know you call your brother every Thursday night, even when you are exhausted because he struggles after your parents died. I know you skip meals when money gets tight, but still tip baristas because you know what service jobs feel like." I swallowed hard. "Damien, I know you pretend to be tougher than you are because people mistake softness for weakness." Silence crashed into the room after that. My chest felt painfully tight now. Because somehow he had seen pieces of me most people never noticed at all. "That does not explain why you were watching me." For the first time since meeting him, Damien hesitated slightly before answering. "I noticed you during a period of my life where noticing anyone felt impossible." His honesty unsettled me completely. There was something deeply lonely hidden beneath all his control. I could hear it now if I listened carefully enough. The city lights reflected softly across his face while rain whispered against the windows behind him. Beautiful, dangerous, exhausted, human. The realization felt risky. "And what exactly were you planning to do?" I asked softly. "Keep observing me forever from a distance." One corner of his mouth moved slightly. "That was the original plan. That is still incredibly creepy. I am aware." I shook my head slowly, overwhelmed and exhausted all at once. "You could have just spoken to me like a normal person." Damien's expression turned unreadable again. "Men like me do not approach women like you casually." "What does that mean?" His eyes held mine steadily. "It means eventually people get hurt." The quiet certainty in his voice sent chills through me. Before I could answer, his phone vibrated sharply in his pocket. Every trace of softness vanished from his face instantly. The transformation happened so fast it stole my breath. Damien pulled the phone out, listened silently for several seconds, then looked toward the suite door. Cold, focused, dangerous again. "What happened?" I asked quietly. He slipped the phone back into his jacket slowly. Someone attempted to access your apartment building 20 minutes after we left. The room suddenly felt freezing cold. What? Damien's jaw tightened once. Claire. His voice dropped lower now, controlled in that terrifying way again. You are not going anywhere alone anymore. The world seemed to narrow around those words. You are not going anywhere alone anymore. Rain continued sliding down the windows behind Damien in silver streaks, while the luxury suite suddenly felt less like a hotel and more like a locked room high above Manhattan. No, I said immediately. Damien's expression did not change. Claire. No. I stepped backward instinctively, crossing my arms tighter over myself. You do not get to decide where I go. His jaw flexed once. Small. Controlled. Someone followed you home tonight. Because of you. Yes. The honesty in that answer hit harder than denial would have. Damien moved slowly toward the kitchen counter, pouring a glass of water with steady hands while I tried to calm the frantic beating in my chest. Everything about him remained controlled even now. No wasted movement. No raised voice. That calm frightened me more than shouting ever could. You should hate me right now, he said quietly. I stared at him. That is not exactly difficult. A faint shadow crossed his expression. Hurt. Gone almost instantly. Fair. He handed me the water glass carefully. Our fingers brushed for half a second, and my pulse betrayed me immediately. I hated that too. I took the glass anyway because my throat felt painfully dry. What happened at my apartment? I asked softly. Damien loosened the collar of his shirt slightly before answering. A man attempted to enter through the rear stairwell. Did they catch him? No, the single word dropped heavily between us. But security cameras captured his face. And Damien looked directly at me. He worked for Senator Holloway 3 years ago. Cold spread through my body instantly. You think Holloway sent someone after me? I think men who rely on power dislike humiliation. I stared down at the untouched water in my hand. This could not be real. Nothing about tonight felt real anymore. A senator. Security teams. Strangers following me home. All because I crossed paths with Damien Moretti for one catastrophic evening. I should call the police. Damien's expression changed immediately. Harder now. No, you do not get to decide that either. Claire. His voice dropped lower. Dangerous. Listen to me carefully. If Holloway is involved, local police will not protect you. That sounds insane. It sounds accurate. Silence crashed into the room again. I walked toward the windows because standing too close to him suddenly made it difficult to think clearly. Manhattan glittered below us while storm clouds rolled slowly above the skyline. Somewhere out there people were still posting photos of us online, speculating, inventing stories. They had no idea how terrified I actually felt. Behind me, Damien remained completely silent for nearly a full minute. Then softly, unexpectedly, he said, I am sorry. I turned around slowly. What? You were not supposed to become involved in this. For the first time since meeting him, I saw something dangerously close to regret in his eyes. Real regret. Not strategic. Not controlled. Human. Then why did you do it? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Why did you pull me beside you tonight? Damien looked at me for a long moment before answering. Because when Holloway touched you, I realized I would rather start a war than watch another man disrespect you. My breath caught painfully in my chest. The words should have sounded possessive, arrogant. Instead, they landed somewhere deep beneath my ribs in a way I did not understand. You barely know me, I whispered again. That stopped mattering weeks ago. Silence swallowed the room whole after that. I looked away first because his eyes suddenly felt too intense to survive for long. The city lights blurred faintly beyond the windows. Exhaustion finally started crashing into me all at once. Emotional, physical, crushing. Damien noticed immediately. Of course he did. You should sleep. I do not think my nervous system remembers how. Something softer touched his expression again. The bedroom locks from the inside. I blinked at him. That is your attempt at reassuring me? I am trying not to frighten you more than I already have. Another dangerous laugh nearly escaped me. God help me, I believed him. Damien stepped farther back then, deliberately creating space between us. I will stay in the adjoining suite. There is another suite? Security protocol. Of course there was. I rubbed my forehead slowly. Your life is exhausting. You have no idea. The answer came quieter this time. Tired. Honest. For one strange moment, the terrifying man standing in front of me looked less like a myth and more like someone carrying the weight of an entire world alone. Then his phone buzzed again. Damien glanced at the screen, and every trace of warmth disappeared instantly. Ice replacing humanity in seconds. What now? I asked carefully. He looked toward the door. Mateo traced the license plate from the car outside your apartment. My stomach tightened, and Damien's jaw hardened. The vehicle belongs to a private security company contracted by Senator Holloway's office. The room went completely silent. Then Damien looked back at me with terrifying calm and said the one thing I never expected to hear from a man like him. I should have protected you sooner. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw camera flashes exploding across the ballroom again. Damien's hand around mine. The man outside my apartment taking photographs through the rain. Senator Holloway's smile tightening when Damien stepped between us. By 4:30 in the morning, I gave up entirely and wandered barefoot into the sweet kitchen wearing an oversized hotel sweatshirt that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. Manhattan still glowed outside the windows like the city itself never needed sleep. I poured coffee with shaking hands and nearly dropped the mug when I heard a quiet voice behind me. You hold the cup too tightly when you are anxious. I turned sharply. Damien stood near the hallway entrance without his suit jacket now, dark sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms. Somehow he still looked completely composed despite the fact that it had to be almost dawn. Do you ever sleep? I asked. Not particularly well. His eyes moved briefly to the untouched coffee pot beside me. That blend is terrible, by the way. It is free. That does not excuse it. I stared at him for one exhausted second before another laugh escaped me despite everything. Damien looked strangely satisfied by the sound. Like my laughter eased something inside him, he did not want anyone else noticing. You are staring again, I muttered quietly while reaching for sugar packets. I know. The honesty in that answer made my pulse stumble annoyingly hard. I focused on stirring my coffee instead. What happens now? Damien leaned one shoulder lightly against the counter across from me. My security team will move you somewhere safer temporarily. No, his jaw tightened immediately. Claire, I am serious. I set the spoon down harder than intended. I cannot disappear into some secret penthouse while your bodyguards follow me around 24 hours a day. You can if it keeps you alive. The calm certainty in his voice froze me completely. Silence filled the kitchen. Soft, heavy, dangerous. You really believe Holloway would hurt me? I whispered. Damien looked at me steadily for several seconds before answering. I believe powerful men become reckless when they think humiliation threatens them. This is insane. Yes. You keep saying yes like that somehow makes this easier. No, he said quietly. It just makes it true. I wrapped both hands tighter around the warm coffee mug because suddenly I felt cold again. Damien noticed instantly. Of course he did. You are frightened. Obviously. His expression shifted slightly then. Softer. Human again. You should be. I looked up at him sharply. That is a terrible thing to say. It is an honest thing to say. He pushed away from the counter slowly and walked toward the windows overlooking Manhattan. Morning rain drifted softly against the glass now, while pale sunlight began bleeding into the skyline beyond the storm clouds. Damien stood there quietly for a moment before speaking again. Fear keeps people alive in my world. Maybe I do not want your world. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Damien went very still. His reflection stared back at us through the window glass. Tall, sharp, untouchable. You think I do? The question landed unexpectedly hard. I looked at him carefully then. Really looked at him. The exhaustion beneath his eyes. The permanent tension hidden beneath all that control. The loneliness. For the first time, I stopped seeing only the terrifying reputation attached to Damien Moretti. I saw the man carrying it. Then why stay in it? I asked softly. A humorless smile touched his mouth briefly. Because men like me are not given exits. Silence stretched again. The city slowly brightened around us while expensive silence filled the suite. Somewhere below, New Yorkers rushed toward subways and coffee shops and ordinary mornings. Mine had disappeared overnight. My brother is going to panic, I whispered suddenly. He already texted me 14 times. Damien reached into his pocket calmly. Your phone. I frowned. What? He held out my phone toward me. Charged. Screen repaired. I blinked in disbelief. How did you? You dropped it in the car earlier. You repaired my phone overnight? The screen was cracked. I stared at him completely speechless for a second. That is the most unreasonably wealthy thing I have ever witnessed. This time Damien actually smiled faintly. Small, real, beautiful enough to feel dangerous. Then his phone rang sharply across the counter. The smile vanished instantly. He answered quietly in Italian, voice low and controlled while I watched his expression darken with every passing second. My stomach tightened again. Damien ended the call slowly. What happened? I asked. He looked toward me with terrifying calm. Someone leaked your address online this morning. My blood turned to ice. What? Damien stepped closer immediately, reading the panic across my face before I even fully processed it myself. My team is already handling it. Handling it how? By making sure nobody reaches you first. I backed away instinctively. Damien, Claire. His voice dropped lower now. Firm. Protective. Look at me. I did. His gray eyes held mine steadily, while Manhattan's stormlight reflected across them like silver. I need you to trust me for the next 24 hours. My throat tightened painfully. That is becoming a problem. Something unreadable flickered across his face. Why? Because somewhere between the ballroom and this hotel suite, the most dangerous man in New York had stopped feeling like the person I feared most. By noon, my face was everywhere. News blogs, gossip accounts, celebrity pages pretending they suddenly cared about politics and charity galas. Every headline showed some variation of the same photo. Damien Moretti standing beside me with his hand wrapped around mine like the entire city belonged to him. I sat frozen on the edge of the hotel bed while my phone buzzed nonstop beside me. Unknown numbers, reporters, messages from coworkers asking if I was secretly dating a billionaire. My manager had sent exactly one text. Take the week off, which was apparently rich person language for your life is too messy for our event company now. Outside the suite windows, Manhattan glowed beneath pale morning rain. Inside, silence pressed heavily against my chest. Damien had spent the last hour in the adjoining room taking calls in a voice so cold and controlled it barely sounded human anymore. Every now and then I heard Italian. Short answers. Orders. The atmosphere around him had shifted completely since sunrise. Sharper now. More dangerous. Like the softness I had seen earlier only existed in rare unguarded moments. I wrapped my arms around myself tighter and stared at another article flashing across my screen. Who is Claire Bennett? The internet had already found my college records. Old social media photos. Interviews from a local art fundraiser I barely remembered attending 2 years ago. Strangers online debated whether I was Damien's girlfriend, mistress, secret fiancé, or another social climber looking for attention. The last one stung more than it should have, because none of them knew how badly I wanted my normal life back already. The adjoining door opened quietly behind me. Damien stepped into the suite while loosening the cuff of his dark shirt. He looked exhausted now. Not physically, emotionally. Like every phone call had cost him another layer of patience. You should not read the comments, he said softly. I locked my phone immediately. Too late. His eyes moved toward me carefully. What did they say? I laughed once without humor. Apparently, I am either your future wife or an opportunist with good timing. Something unreadable flickered across his expression at the word wife. Gone too quickly for me to understand. Damien walked toward the windows slowly, staring out over the city while rain streaked softly against the glass. People create stories when they fear what they do not understand. And what exactly are we? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Silence stretched between us instantly. Damien turned toward me slowly. Gray eyes steady, intense enough to make my pulse lose rhythm again. That is becoming difficult to answer. My breath caught unexpectedly. The room suddenly felt smaller, warmer, dangerous in an entirely different way now. Before either of us could say another word, someone knocked sharply on the suite door. 3 quick knocks. Professional. Damien's entire expression changed immediately. Cold again. Controlled. He crossed the room silently and opened the door halfway while one of his security men spoke quietly from the hallway. I caught only fragments. Lobby. Press. Vehicle waiting outside. Damien's jaw hardened visibly. Move them farther back. Already trying. The guard hesitated before adding something else quietly enough that I almost missed it. There is another issue. Damien's eyes sharpened instantly. What issue? Senator Holloway is downstairs. The air disappeared from my lungs. Damien went completely still. Not angry. Worse. Focused. Why? He requested a private conversation with Miss Bennett. I stood up immediately. Absolutely not. Damien looked back at me over his shoulder. His gaze softened slightly the moment it landed on me again. You are not speaking to him. I was not planning to. The bodyguard handed Damien a phone silently before stepping back into the hallway. Damien glanced at the screen. Whatever he saw there darkened his expression further. What now? I asked quietly. He closed the door carefully before answering. Holloway leaked another story to the press. My stomach tightened instantly. About me? Damien walked toward me slowly. Controlled. Calm. Terrifyingly calm. According to several media outlets, he said quietly, you are currently under federal investigation for financial fraud involving one of my companies. I stared at him in complete disbelief. What? It is false. Obviously it is false. Panic surged hard through my chest now. People are going to believe that. Yes. Damien, look at me. His voice dropped lower again, firm enough that my panic paused automatically. I looked up. His gray eyes held mine steadily while Manhattan rain blurred behind him. This is what powerful men do when they cannot control a narrative, he said quietly. They destroy credibility first. Fear twisted sharply through me now. Real fear. Not gossip. Not cameras. Something colder. More permanent. Damien must have seen it in my face because his expression shifted immediately. Softer again. Human again. He stepped closer carefully like he was approaching something fragile. Claire. My throat tightened painfully. My brother is going to see those headlines. I know. My entire life is falling apart because of one night. Damien's jaw flexed once before he said something so quietly I almost missed it. No, his fingers brushed lightly against my wrist. Steady. Warm. Protective. Your life changed because someone finally stood beside you publicly instead of looking away. Silence crashed between us after that. Then another knock sounded sharply at the suite door. Urgent this time. Damien's expression darkened instantly. The bodyguard's voice came through the wood from outside. Sir, Holloway's people just entered the hotel lobby with cameras. Damien looked at me once. Just once. Then his eyes turned absolutely lethal in a way that made my heartbeat stop entirely. He should not have done that.